If you've been a fan of anime for any length of time, there's a common trope that you're likely to have noticed when you're watching and reading, and that would be the commonality of absolutely trash father figures in manga and anime. My goal in this video is to discuss with you all some of the most prominent examples of trash dads in both anime and manga, then spend some time exploring exactly why there are so many examples of bad dads in these mediums, because it can't simply be a coincidence, right? The first example we're going to talk about is so widespread and well known, it has literally become a meme amongst anime and manga fans across the globe at this point. The man I'm referring to is none other than Son Goku. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Goku is the biggest deadbeat dad in anime or manga history. He truly isn't, not by a long shot. He loved his son and had his back in important moments quite a few times. But the reality of Goku is that he was largely an absent figure throughout the majority of his son's life and thrust his expectations of being a fighter onto his son before allowing him the opportunity to really even discover the person that he wanted to be. If you know anything about Goku, you know that the man has fighting and combat literally in his blood. Dude comes from a long line of warriors, and even though he wasn't raised amongst the rest of the Saiyans, his grandpa Gohan was a renowned martial artist and taught Goku about martial arts from his earliest stages in life. Goku breathes fighting. He associates battle with everything good that has ever happened to him. Fighting is what has allowed him to make his closest friends in life. Fighting is what allowed him to protect those friends once he had them. Fighting has brought him more internal satisfaction and peace than any other experience that he has ever had in his life. So it makes sense that Goku, being the martial arts nut that he is, would want to share his love for it with his son Gohan. But one thing that the series has shown the audience on numerous occasions is that Gohan's nature is much different than that of his father's. He's more timid, introverted, and conflict-averse than his father ever was. And while it's true that Gohan does have the latent potential to be an incredible fighter, the reality is that never once has he really been given the chance to express whom he really wants to be. Chi-Chi has consistently told Gohan that he needs to be a scholar, whatever the hell that actually means. Vegeta and all of Goku's friends expect Gohan to be a powerhouse strictly because of who his father is. And this is my main beef with Goku. Not just that he spent a significant chunk of Gohan's life either dead or training in the most remote parts of the world, but rather that he thrust the mantle of the world's savior onto his son simply because that's the responsibility he took on, and placed Gohan numerous times in situations that he was severely uncomfortable with just because he knew he could handle it. This isn't to say that maybe somewhere along the line Gohan couldn't learn to love fighting as well, or that he necessarily hates martial arts because of how he was brought up, just more pointing out how the dynamic between Goku and Gohan is complicated, and while Goku was not the worst dad, he certainly was not the best. Next, we gotta talk about Jing Freaks, Gon's dad from Hunter x Hunter. I don't care what any of y'all say, that man's a bum. Again, I'm not gonna call him the worst father, but dude is definitely for the streets. Emotions aside, let's take an objective look real quick at what that man did to Gon. So Jing gets a lady pregnant, right? Then rather than stay with the lady and raise the kid, you steal the baby. Then after you steal the baby, you take him to your cousin's house, whom you haven't seen since you were a child, by the way, and tell her, hey, now you gotta care for him. Then you spend years gallivanting, traveling to God knows where, and somehow you eventually end up becoming a video game developer while abandoning your fatherly duties. But it's cool though, right? Because you say the whole point is that you want your son to grow up one day and beat it. Then you'll reward him with allowing him to see you. Which, can we take a minute to talk about how goddamn arrogant that is? Like, who the hell are you to abandon this child, then make him jump through all these hoops in order to get the honor just to meet your sorry ass? But it gets better, right? Because your son loses his arm in the process, but eventually beats the game, only to find out that it doesn't even lead him directly to you. It leads him to your friend, whom you also went radio silent on, who has absolutely zero idea where the hell you are. Then after all this, and when your son has barely recovered from an illness that damn near took his life, you make him climb a tower, all for the honor of telling him it's about the journey, son, not the destination. Screw you, Jing Freaks. Now I know that Gon holds no animosity towards his father, and that's absolutely fine. That's just how Gon is built. But Jing Freaks is a questionable example of a father figure, even in the most generous of interpretations. I won't say that Jing does not care about Gon. I think that he does love him and likely thought about him in his travels a fair bit, but the man was just not there for a massive chunk of his son's life and made him go through hell to even get the chance to communicate with him. Jing Freaks is an extraordinary hunter and an exceedingly interesting person, but a garbage to your father. Now let's talk about one that's pretty cut and dry example of a trash human being and father, Dario Brando. This man could arguably be considered one of the worst on the list simply because of the repercussions his awful parenting had on generations of lives after he died. Dario Brando is Dio Brando's father in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series, and simply put, the man's just awful. Dude is physically and emotionally abusive to both Dio and his mother. He was a gambler and a severe alcoholic, and his behavior eventually led to Dio's mother dying from overwork, trying her best to support their household and all the damage damage caused by Dario's bum ass. Dario is also a thief and a con man because of course he is, and his deception of Jonathan Joestar's father sets the stage for a centuries-long feud between the Joestars and Dio Brando. One can only imagine how different things might have been for both Dio and the Joestars if Dario was not complete trash, but right now, all one can do is dream. Next up, Yujiro Hanma. Much like the situation with Goku and Jin, Yujiro and his relationship to his son Baki is fairly complicated and will have people divided on if Yujiro is justifying his actions or not. Personally, I put Yujiro as a mix of traits between both Jin and Goku, mixing in one part constant overshadowing ideal for his son to aspire to, and another part negligence and attachment issues. One thing we have to say straight away is that Yujiro Hanma is barely a human being. Dude is described in the series as pretty much being a wild beast in human skin, and all of his actions pretty well coincide with this description. Yujiro has no qualms literally assaulting women if he thinks they can bear him a strong son, and will slaughter you in the blink of an eye at the slightest hint of disrespect or a challenge. Yujiro is the catalyst for Baki's training to become the man we watch develop throughout the series, as his primary motivation becomes to beat the living hell out of Yujiro after he watches him kill his mother. Following this, Yujiro is a persistent instigating force in Baki's life, coming in periodically to beat the brakes off the young boy and show him how weak he still is in comparison to him, the ultimate apex predator, causing Baki to train further and become the absolute force of nature that we see in the series' later half. By the description that I just gave you, you might think that it's pretty damn obvious why one might call Yujiro a trash dad, but things get more complicated when you realize that Baki's mother was abusive towards Baki herself and very far from being a healthy or well-adjusting human being. And also the fact that while Yujiro does have his own journey he sets out on, he is a near constant presence in the most significant fights throughout Baki's life and sincerely wants his son to go stronger so that he has someone on the planet that exists that could attempt to give him a worthy challenge. In his own sick way, Yujiro loves his son and cares about his success. But you can't have this discussion without adding in the fact that Yujiro's father, God knows how many other illegitimate sons across the world, many by force, without even thinking twice about returning to check in on them or making sure they were cared for in even the slightest bit. Regardless of whether you empathize with the man and his methods or not, denying the trash dad allegations for Yujiro is a hard sell, even for the most loyal fan. I want to end off with arguably the most trash dad father figure in anime, Gambino from Berserk. Guts had a hard life, to put it in the most mild of terms. He was birthed from the hanging body of his mother, surviving after being picked up by a woman in a roving band of mercenaries who took pity on him. For Guts' whole upbringing, he never knew traditional care or affection. The closest thing he had to a father was the mercenary band's leader, Gambino, whom Guts constantly sought the approval of by trying to make himself useful and prove himself in battle. Gambino taught Guts to fight, primarily to make sure he was not dead weight on the battlefield. This was about the only good thing that he did for him. Gambino brutally beats Guts in training constantly, demeaned him, and overall treated him as more of a nuisance to be overcome than a human being to be cherished. Gambino's ultimate betrayal of Guts came through when, after a battle, Guts enters his tent and is greeted by a massive man named Donovan who tells him that Gambino sold Guts' body to him for mere coins, and that he was going to have his way with him for the remainder of the day until he was satisfied. This betrayal by the only man he ever viewed as a parental figure deeply scarred Guts and would color his ability to trust and believe in others for the rest of his life. Worse yet, Guts was forced to kill Gambino in an act of self-defense, leaving him traumatized and confused, having murdered what was a terrible person objectively, but also the only mentor he ever knew. Gambino was trash and a prime example of one of the worst anime dads you're going to find. Now that we've gone over some examples of the archetypal types of bad fathers present in anime and manga, let's have a discussion about why so many depictions of this style of father may be present within the medium. In order to begin breaking down the depictions of fathers in anime, one has to begin by taking a look at the historic culture and value systems present in these stories' country of origin, Japan. Although things may be changing with the passage of time and changing demographics, historically, Japan has been a patriarchal society with a traditional belief about the way a household should be managed. Historically, in Japanese households, the belief was that the man was to go out to be the primary breadwinner, while the mother was to serve as the emotional foundation of the household and care for the offspring. In previous decades, and by some reports even now, it was not uncommon for Japanese salarymen to work 80-hour work weeks as standard practice. The expectations of many companies within the Japanese workforce is that the employees are always to put the company first, with health and familial responsibilities needing to be put on the back burner if one is serious about the obligations they have made to their organization. The philosophy of working till death is one that is very common within companies' cultures, and work-related fatalities are common enough that there has even been a word created for it: karoshi. These realities begin to paint a vivid picture of why absentee or harsh father figures are the norm in Japanese media. A few decades back, there was a study done regarding the perception of middle-class Japanese fathers by their children. A significant number of respondents in the study listed their fathers primarily as being the house's breadwinner, and many described their fathers as being emotionally unavailable, seldom playing with them, and not serving as a particularly good example of a parental role model. Viewing anime and manga through this societal lens, we can start to understand a bit better why dads within anime and manga are depicted the way they are. The reality is that many of the creators of these series that we love likely grew up in a household with a workaholic father who was either emotionally absent or literally absent from the household, with the workplace expectations of the society being duty and company above all else in many instances. Many of the partners and children of these men were likely used to being put on the back burner while their husbands and fathers worked late nights at the office or came home too drained to provide them with any meaningful attention, or perhaps even lost their lives from the unsustainable work-life balance. And this examination is to not speak badly of Japanese men or to make the claim that they are all bad fathers who do not care about their families or life outside of work. It's only to give those of us not within Japan's cultural borders a better understanding of why certain tropes within the art that we love find themselves occurring so often, and that the stories the culture tells are often indicative of relevant discourse going on within the society at that time. Thank you all a ton for watching. I hope you found something within this video worthwhile, and let me know your thoughts about dads in anime and some of your favorite or least favorite that have shown up in your favorite anime or manga series. Talk to you all again in the next video.